Hi there, Murphy here. I'm here today with Brady Hardin from the Life After podcast. We had a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and it was such a good. Well, you judge for yourselves. Either it was such a good conversation, I decided not to release it, or
Hmm.
some complete fuckwit messed up the recording, and we didn't get any sound. Now, the person who, or the fuckwit, was either option A, me, and there is no option B. So,
Hey, technical difficulties. That what I always say is Plan B is probably going to be more interesting than Plan A. It's got extra creativity.
I was so embarrassed, and thanks for being such a good sport and coming back again. And hopefully we can have a conversation that's as good as the first one, because the first one was a magnificent conversation. And I think anybody would have enjoyed listening to that. So, Brady, the reason that I contacted you initially to come on here was because just read your bio on Twitter when you followed me. And the reason I did that, I think I explained this to you before, was that I just used to follow everybody back. People would follow me, I just follow them back. And then I all of a sudden got spammed with loads and loads of porn. Now, there's a time and place for it. I'm not anti-porn, but um,
Yeah, that's what I told my
it,
parents when I was a kid too. Like when I was a teenager, all these they just came in me. Yeah,
yeah, but my time on Twitter is, for something in particular. I don't want to be spammed. And the other thing that I got spammed with was loads and loads of, sort of begging things, to go and send money to Africa, and that sort of
yeah.
stuff. So I started reading the bios of everybody who follows me now, and I read yours, and I just thought, man, there is a conversation in that bio. I understand you've changed it a bit, but I'm going to go with the original bio that I had when we
Go
had
for it.
our
Yeah, yeah.
original conversation. Um, I love the picture, actually. The preacher saying you can't be happy or moral without God, and then SpongeBob there, my dumb ass believing him. I love that picture.
Thank you.
But your bio says, gay ex-Christian dad with a Bible degree advocating for atheism to have a seat at the table for those deconstructing from their faith. It just seemed that was one, slightly meandering sentence, but
Thank you.
with a hell of a lot in it. And so, could you tell me how you came to that, and what your story is, how you got from where you were to where you are?
Yeah, sure. I'll try to give like the crash course of Brady Hardin so it's not too long. But um, yeah, I grew up in a Southern Baptist church. My dad was a deacon and he was abusive to my mom. He cheated, lied about it, gaslit her, and they got a divorce when I was around 7. And that was really hard growing up in a Southern Baptist church and having that happen, just because, we were that family. So I went through that, and then around 14 is when I dedicated my future into the full-time ministry, and that was every decision that I made from the age of 14 on until at 28 was to be the best pastor that I could be, that would be able to preach the Bible from verse by verse and, do the best justice that I could. But also around 14, I realized that I was attracted to other guys. And that was kind of a problem with being, because we were told, oh, you choose it. And I was like, I don't want this. I'm like begging God to take it away and to heal me and, struggling with same sex attraction and all that bullshit. So, I didn't act on it, and I repressed myself for the Bible because I felt like that's what I needed to do. I wanted to be faithful to the word. I wanted to do what I was told. So around 18 or 19, I kind of went through a mini deconstruction where I stopped believing what I was taught to believe, and I wanted to read the Bible and know God according to his own word was like a thing that I always prayed. So I stopped being kind of like the church I grew up in was like a mega church. We did the whole like pray the prayer of salvation and you're always saved. Once prayed, always saved. And just really just Billy Graham basic bullshit evangelism. But at 18 or 19, I'm like, no, I really want to know the Bible deeper. So I studied on my own, didn't read any book of the Bible for 2 years, and it came out more of like a Calvinist, like Reformed theology. excuse me, which was kind of a big movement at that time anyway. So ended up joining a church. Like I was youth pastoring in a couple different places. Then I joined a church that agreed with me that I agreed with theologically. Met a woman there. She knew before our first date that I was attracted to men and wasn't planning on acting on it. And we started to date or court because we were like the Duggars or something, I guess. I don't know, but we courted and then we ended up getting engaged. We got married and we had a son. And then a little bit after that, I discovered her Ashley Madison account, that she was having some what she looks back at now is like most probably postpartum depression that led to some really like bad behavior, or I don't want to say bad, but just what is it, erratic behavior, and things were difficult. We went through a bad divorce. I took her back 4 or 5 times. We were counseled by the church, and it was during that time that like I experienced the most spiritual abuse by the pastors. It was like this panel of 3 pastors, and they were there to counsel us. To find out one of them hit on my ex-wife during the counseling. Yeah, right. And such bullshittery. And then another one was just an ass. Like he told me, like during this, like between 3 and 4 or 2 and 3 that I took her back, my best friend died of sudden heart failure. So I went through like dealing with all of that. And then one of the pastors, like as I was talking about what I was experiencing and trying to do like counseling, he's like, Brady, when you talk about your feelings, you sound weak and not like a leader. Like that was a direct quote. And also told me that Christians have no reason to raise their voice. So I was just like in this really stupid gaslighting bullshit, bad faith counseling situation. And I tried to stay a believer. I tried to fight against it, but I ended up getting disfellowshipped because my ex-wife filed for divorce and I didn't refuse it, as if that was a thing. I tried to go to other churches, and they contacted those other churches to warn them about how rebellious I was. And just everything just started to be this big fucking domino effect. And I was outed to my mom, and she tried to have it so I wouldn't have my son overnights, because if I didn't molest or rape him, one of my friends would, was a direct quote at that time. And so just going through all of that shit and losing and realizing the Holy Spirit is doing fucking shit for me. Like he's not answering my prayers. I'm like doing everything I can to keep my faith going and to like, stay faithful to the word. But I'm realizing, no, this whole time I've been taught what to see and what to believe, and none of this is real. And so finally, when it was clear that the divorce was going to happen, I tried to go to these other churches, and I was like trying to like, even like the church admitted that they were wrong to disfellowship me, but they took 3 or 4 months to get around to lifting up, to put me on stage and like ask for forgiveness and to like reconcile me to the entire support system that I had for 7 years that they cut out of, like literally disfellowshipped. Like I was shunned from that community. Like on a Sunday morning, the pastors went in front and said, Brady no longer is showing fruit of salvation. We need to cut him off. And any conversation we have is to bring him back to the gospel. So I was treated as an outsider. Like I lost my entire support system. I lost my wife. I lost half of my son because I was only seeing him half the time. I lost my best friend because he died. And then I lost my family because they turned against me. And it just hit rock bottom. And I realized, like, I can't believe this way anymore because it's not real. This is all a fucking facade. And it was during that time that I was like, fuck this. And I downloaded Grindr. And then I just, like, I finally allowed myself to be me, And so the strange thing is now, that was like 6 or 7 years ago. My son is older now. He's going to turn 8 here soon. He's doing wonderful. I've actually started a friendship with my ex-wife. She realized that she's queer, and she just got married to her new wife like over the weekend, and that's where they are right now. And so like she's deconstructed, she's gone through like therapy and like figured like stuff out and like worked through it and like did hard work. So proud of her. And so like we're all just like finding each other on this other side now of like, yeah, that was really fucked up indoctrination that we grew up with. So that's how I became a gay Christian dad with the Bible degree, and I'm advocating for atheism because I noticed that like whenever we started this podcast, Life After, with my friend Chuck, we just really wanted to hold space for people who are deconstructing, but like thinking about their faith and analyzing it piece by piece of like, why do I believe this way? And we noticed that a lot of people just deconstruct by like, they take little beliefs as like separate thoughts, and they're like, the Bible teaches homophobia. Should I be homophobic? No. Okay. And then there's like no criticism back to where they're getting this information, or understanding that faith is seeing what you're told to see, whereas observation is, hey, we don't have to hide behind anything. It's right here. Let's all look at it the same, right? So we noticed that a lot of like deconstruction stuff was just all about becoming a liberal Christian instead. And we wanted to be a little bit more than that. And then me specifically on Twitter, my goal is to be kind of more of that, like atheists, like you can burn the whole system down. Or not even atheist, just ex-Christian is important to me. You know, like you can leave the whole problematic thing behind and start anew. Secular humanism, find your humanism from watching fucking Star Trek. It doesn't matter, but there's so many other options than just pivoting to a more modern version of Christianity that doesn't actually allow itself to be criticized and doesn't actually work on the things that is wrong with it, telling people what to see, what to think, what to feel. It's just kind of a kinder version of that. So that's kind of what my presence is online now, is to kind of be that opposition voice, because they're never going to hand a microphone to an atheist at a church. And so I recognize that, like, I never heard this other side. I was indoctrinated as a child, and I was cut off from outside stuff. So I never got an opportunity to hear the other side. So my goal now is to try to provide that for people and make it clear that there's more options than just to stay within the faith that you grew up with and were indoctrinated with. You can go deeper than and check out your whole system of why you believe and how you believe.
Yeah, okay. There's a couple of things I picked up in there that we could dig on a little bit more. Well, first of all, it's just something I want to say. This whole idea, and I see it quite often on Twitter, that it's a choice. Your sexual orientation is a choice.
Oh God, no!
It's just absolutely ridiculous. I just think back to probably around the time that I went from primary school into senior school. When you're starting to should we say develop, and I can remember that my homeroom teacher, or my mentor teacher, was a pretty hot young teacher who used to wear very tight trousers, and my reaction to that was not a choice, and I reacted to her presence, and it's just I never made a choice. Oh, I'm going to be attracted to women. Oh, she's an attractive woman. I'm going to be react a certain way around her. It's just that happens, and it just strikes me that the people that say that have a sort of an empathy bypass, where they can't put themselves in the position of their own awakening with their heterosexual desires, and can't just see that somebody else could just be attracted to other people of the same sex. To me, it's absolutely crazy. And I don't think it's exclusively a religious thing, but it certainly is very prevalent amongst the religious community, that sort of lack of empathy and lack of understanding of how they came by their own sexuality.
That's such a good point. Yeah, I mean, there's not because whenever you're the dominant culture, and like whenever you're straight cis white male or whatever, you expect everyone to be the same as you, because your entire culture is created for people that are the same as you. So whenever there's somebody who's outside of that, they don't have the categories in their minds yet, and to like look at it in a different way. But the problem is that religion discourages, and these holy books discourage you to make that distinction and to make that category in your mind of that there are possible other things that are just as normal, but they're not just as normalized by the culture. And so I'm glad to see that we're in a movement now where people are pulling out of that and have heard enough things. Because I remember right before I came out as a non-believer, or it came out as gay the first time. It came out as gay the only time, and then it came out as an unbeliever later on. That's another thing. But right before I came out as gay, I remember making a comment on Facebook that was like, "Hey, if 100 people tell me that if 100 gay people tell me that they don't choose to be gay, and one person who's straight says that it is a choice, guess who I'm going to believe?" And also, like, flip that. If 100 people that are straight say, "No, you have to choose that," and then there's the gay person who is like, "No, that isn't my lived experience," I'm going to believe that one person. And it caused an uproar. And it's like, this should not be a controversial statement. Like, you believe people who are talking about their experience over those who are speaking about somebody else's experience that they're completely ignorant of. And it was just a weird thing as a Southern Baptist growing up with, "Oh yeah, you choose to be gay, you do this, you do that." And I'm like a 14-year-old boy, like, this is the last thing that I want. You think that I dedicated my life to the full-time ministry. You think that I'm going to be like, "Hey, how can I fuck this up for myself?" Fuck no. Like, give me a break. So yeah, you're absolutely on the money.
Yeah, it's interesting. I always thought about it from a slightly different point of view when I was a teenager. I always thought, wouldn't it be great if all of the other boys were same-sex attracted, and then all the girls would be for me?
Yeah, it's a good strategy, you know.
So, yeah, but it certainly helps when you're ugly, you know. It certainly helps. So that was one point. You said you were a youth pastor. I hadn't picked that up before from any of our conversations or our chat online. A lot of people have told me that that's hard work, being a youth pastor. That you work a lot of hours and put a lot in, and a lot of them suffer from burnout and stuff.
Yeah, it was hard at times, but like my thing as a youth pastor was I was all about preaching and teaching. Like that was always a passion of mine. Was I just wanted to know the Bible and to be able to teach it well, right? And so I even had a pastor who was reprimanded me once, and he said, "Brady, we, as in like the search committee, I guess, or whatever, Brady, we're just concerned that you're all about the Bible and not about activities." And me being like a little fundamentalist, I was like, "Well, thanks," because that's what I wanted. Like, I was all about the Bible, it was all about God. I wanted to teach. And so, I was more of like the youth pastor that's like, "Okay, sit down, let's get a notebook. Let's like go verse by verse. Let's learn this stuff." And like, even some of them to this day, like, remember that. And we've had conversations, and some of our missionaries now, and like, yeah, I guess I did my job well, but that was just like more of my focus. And so some of the burnout for me, even then, was being like that radical voice that's like, something's not right in this society. Like, something's not right in this like church environment culture. And it was like, even back then, even as a kid, even in my home church, I was kind of like this. I wanted to fuck the system a little bit to shake it off. Like I legitimately wanted to know God and to Bible stuff, whatever. And it literally got me in trouble, like starting at 16, 17 or whatever. Right. So my burnout was a little different. It was more of just having to deal with even I'm in St. Louis, like 20 minutes south of me, like where I grew up is like, we're not far from farms, and where I'm now in the city is different, but it was more of kind of like a suburban rural type of situation, and just the closed-minded bullshittery of like a lot of the conversations and everything was like, should people have to dress up for church or not? And I was like, who fucking cares? Like, the original church sold all of their, like, there was literally a time in my life where I could fit all of my possessions inside of the back of a car on purpose, because I was one of those, I wanted to have one set of clothes, and I wanted to have like 2 boxes of stuff because I literally believed what the Bible said about selling your possessions and living on little to nothing. And so I definitely didn't plan for my future very well. But yeah, my burnout was just different. It was just, I think, constantly wanting to be this radical person who went for a more real version of what we said we believed, and did so by rattling cages, and that was kind of tiresome at times.
So the message for any youth pastors out there is less Bible and more badminton. Is that right?
Yeah. Less Bible, more badminton. What we would have called that where I came from is like I don't know if you're familiar with Paul Washer, but he's just this asshole of a preacher and evangelist. But that was kind of the stuff that it came out of. And he would always refer to it as 6 Flags over Jesus. Like that was the type of churches that just wanted to have fun or whatever. It's like, oh yeah, 6 Flags over Jesus. But
the last thing that was pick up from your introduction and your story was your current relationship with your ex-wife and your son. How is that going?
Oh my God, amazing. Like my ex-wife's wife, like they just got married. I love her. She's so cool. They had me over for dinner. Like there was, I would say like it's been a process, definitely with any sort of divorce or like, rebuilding that relationship and that trust after all these years. But she kind of started to reach out to me because she recognized that I've become like this weird, like online just deconstruction voice, like super niche community celebrity or something, right? And so she would start asking me questions about things. Excuse me, I'm burping. Like one day she asked me like, hey, do you know who Derek Webb is? And Derek Webb is, like this Christian music singer who left the faith and has like been on my podcast. I'm like, yeah, I've been to his house to interview him. And she's like, oh my God, really? So like we were able to talk about that. And she started talking about the things that like were going on in her therapy and stuff. And then I realized that like when she was dishonest in our marriage, it wasn't because she wanted to fuck me over. It wasn't because she wanted to ruin my life. It's because she wasn't provided the language and the vocabulary to deal with the shame that she felt. And when you feel shame in that culture, and with the environments that she grew up with that were similar to the environments that I grew up with, when you don't have vocabulary for your shame, you shut down and you lie and you protect yourself because you feel like your survival depends on it. And we were able to kind of have like this moment of realizing like, I wasn't the best husband. You weren't the best wife. You weren't honest about parts. And then later I became a little bit more loose with my honesty. And it came to a part where we're just like, I get you. And here's the more important thing. My parents divorced, they remarried. My parents never could get along. My brother and I were just pawns in the divorce. We were like told to testify against one parent and told what to say, but then that parent also hit my other parent and broke that parent's nose at times, like while being a deacon, like just all this bullshit, right? And they were never able to reconcile or do anything that was the best interest of my brother and I, with the help of the Holy Spirit, that is unifying them and teaching them supernatural love, joy, peace, patience. No, but like my ex-wife and I, as queer ass non-believers, were able to provide a more like loving, inclusive situation for our son, and we co-parent like in a way that like, again, I want to be the adult I needed as a kid. I wanted to be the voice that I needed when I was younger. And the fact that I'm able to do that as my son, for my son, shit, I was hearing up, sorry. The fact that we're able to provide that for him now heals so much shit that I went through and gives so much more meaning to it, because like, wherever he goes, he's going to be loved, and he's going to be loved in a way that's beneficial to him, not as an attack to the other side. And so the fact that her and I and now her partner are able to cohesively co-parent is more evidence of non-faith than I ever had of faith within my lived experience. And I think that's
I think when we've spoken about that in the past, I've said to you that I'm sure that your son will turn out much better balanced and so on, because he's actually being brought up by people who get on, who love him, and it doesn't matter at all that it's shall we say, doing air quotes, a non-traditional type of family setup, because if you go back into history, was this traditional family that a lot of religious people go on about, a lot of non-religious people probably think of as well, how long has that gone into the past? I would have thought that, if we go back into prehistoric times, people used to die hunting and stuff like that, and their kids would have been brought up by the wider group anyway.
It takes a village. Like, that's why that phrase is there, right? It takes a village, because your parents probably got eaten by a woolly mammoth, yeah.
Yeah, that's I think it'll turn out much better for him, and hopefully he'll grow up to be a very well balanced atheist.
Yeah.
So, Brady, we've got your early story, but now I want to move on to the Life After podcast. And I've listened to a fair bit of this in the last couple of weeks, traveling backwards and forwards. It's a good podcast. It's very entertaining. You've had some good guests on. So, how did it come apart? And then maybe we'll talk about a couple of episodes that I've listened to recently.
The podcast came together because I started to see I didn't have any vocabulary for what the fuck just happened to me. Like, as I left Christianity, I just took a couple of a year or two, and I'm just I'm just gonna focus on gay. I've been wanting to do sex and be with sucking dick since I was 14. So I'm just gonna focus on that. So I just sowed my wildness, and then I through that though, I'm realizing I'm really fucked up mentally. My mental health is the shit, because I went through trauma within 6 months, being discovering being cheated on each time was that's a traumatic thing, and to have to do that several times, plus my mental health wasn't good because of where I grew up, and then my best friend dying, and then losing my job because I was too distracted, because everything, all within 6 months. It was hell. So, and it also just becoming a new dad. And right before my son was born, I had spinal surgery through here, where they had to do 2 discs that became dislocated and were pinching a nerve to the point where I had a lot of medical problems. And so I was gaining weight, depression, all of this, And as I was coming out of that, I recognized that a couple of my other friends were kind of doing the same thing, but they were leaving Christianity. One of them was Jamie Lee Finch, and she's a wonderful person. I love her. But we were all kind of Christian buddies back in the day, and I started to see that she was just really interested in burning patriarchy down, and that was her thing. I'm fuck yeah. But then one day she posted this thing on Facebook that was about religious trauma syndrome. And since then, I don't really call it religious trauma syndrome, but I recognize it. I don't know if it's really should be classified as a syndrome, blah, blah, blah. Let the professionals talk about that. But the article that was posted was so affirming and gave me vocabulary of when you are brought up in a authoritarian faith, these are the common mental health and common emotional things that come out of it. And there was diagrams. There was a thing about childhood indoctrination on the website too. And I'm just this is me. I'm not alone. Because where we were, if you got disfellowshipped or you were mad, you just disappeared, right? You never heard from those people. You never heard their side of the story. You never heard anything. But I was oh shit. And it fucked with me for a while. And so I started going to see a therapist, and then I got a few of my friends. A lot of them ended up being season 1 guest. Priska is a friend of mine that I've known for like years. Chuck, who's my co-host, Jamie Lee Finch, Dr. James Croft, who's the head of like, I didn't know him when I was younger. I actually met him on a gay dating app after I came out, and like then like we became friends, and I'm like, oh my god, I love this guy. And he's a secular humanist, like not a pastor, but it's an ethical society that he gives talks on each week. So it's like he is what I wanted to be, but as an atheist or as a secular humanist. I thought that was so cool. So I messaged a bunch of them and I said, I don't know what this looks like. I was into podcasting because or a podcast because I loved Lost, and Lost was like one of the first shows that like had a weekly podcast. And I was like, yeah. They answered 2 of my questions once. They were like, Carlton Hughes was like, oh, we got another question from Brady Hardin. And then Carlton Hughes goes, way to go, Brady Hardin. So yeah, I've got that audio saved. Yeah, I'm petty like that. But like I loved podcasting and stuff from that like community. Jay and Jack was another podcast I listened to. And I messaged my friends and I'm like, hey, I don't know what this looks like, but like I want to do a podcast where we talk about this that's like inspired by this article. I want to give a voice for us. Would you guys be willing to be a guest? And the first one to respond was Chuck, and he's like, yeah, hell, I've got all the equipment and I know how to edit, because he does like sound engineering for fun. He does like music and I mean, he was in that bands that I used to, visit. And so he quickly became the first episode we had with him. It was him and I was like drunk, like probably high, because I couldn't deal with my trauma very well. Then I would say that as I'm drinking alcohol, but it was like I wasn't in a good headspace. I wasn't ready yet. So our first take was just shit, and it got thrown out the window. Our second one was better, more polished, and we also had to learn how to podcast. We also had to learn how to do like interviews and how to do that. So my brain, I'm a little bit on the autism spectrum, I think. So my brain works in a different way, and so I was able to like think of like, okay, this is what an episode should look like. This is the templates that we need. And then I was able to have like that vision. He was able to do the practical side of it. And the thing about Chuck and I is, when we were Christians, I was I was a Calvinist, which is not like popular. So they're the ones that are all like predestination, like Jonathan Edwards. John Piper was like, no, I want to be John Piper. R.C. Sproul, like all these, like that was my shit. And then Chuck was the opposite. But he was the only Armenian that I could deal with, and he would joke that I was the only Calvinist that he could deal with. So him and I are so opposite. He is multiracial. I'm white as fuck. I'm gay. He's straight. He's very intellectual. I'm more of like the cool mom who just wants to kick back and talk shit about people. And like we just bounce off each other so well. And so we kind of like just had this idea of like, we just want to have a platform for people to tell their stories, because we literally believe that I'm not going to put this words by Chuck's mouth, but like I believe that storytelling is is our only superpower, because it can make you respond. If you believe something that I tell you in a story, you could either respond in great ways, or it could become a limiting indoctrination thing. So I'm like, no, I want to tell these people's stories. I want to get people who've been fucked over by the church and who've just didn't fit into the culture of dominance. And I want to give them the microphone and say, tell us your story. And our whole process has been to be as intersectional and empathetic as possible. And I'm just so fucking proud of it. And then on top of that, we've have like a private Facebook group where we hold space for people to deconstruct. And I'm not on there to like tell all of them like progressive Christianity is bullshit, because that's my Twitter. I have a distinction of like, I hold space for these people here, but on Twitter, I can speak my own views more, right? So it's more of like a defense offense sort of thing. So it's just the dynamics of everything have been cool, so interesting. And on top of that, though, it's given so much more meaning to the shit that I went through, because not only am I able to heal myself through it, I'm helping other people heal. And I came to the realization that like I definitely at this point have helped more people out of Christianity than I did evangelizing them into Christianity. So I feel like the harmful impact that I've made on the world was made up for, and now the rest of this is just extra credit.
Yeah.
But it's like my passion. It's so healing for me to like be able to give the microphone to somebody to tell their story and have other people be like, shit, me as well. And then have other
Yeah.
people like, and then think of it that way. And just to get like not just like fan mail, like, oh my God, I love your guys' podcast. You're so funny. No, it's more of like, hey, I'm going through a divorce right now, and you helped me figure out something that I really needed to like understand about God, and the absence of God, or just like, hey, I didn't think the thing we always hear is, I thought I was the only one. I thought I was the only one. I thought I was the only one going through this, right? Because the cultures that we came out of, they are designed to silence those who aren't part of it. It's an echo chamber by design, right? So those of us who are finally hearing this other side or giving the mic to people to talk about their experiences, it's giving vocabulary and healing to people. And a big thing that we do is destigmatize professional therapy, because the shit that I came out of, like Baptist, Midwestern American, Calvinistic, whatever, we no, I mean, that's science. It's the ways of the world, of mental health and self-care. That's all just selfish bullshit. But no, we want to destigmatize that, because the healing that I've found through professional therapy and that other people have has been immense. And we understand that it's not always affordable for people. So we want to like provide resources for people and help them find the right therapist. We've even helped like pay for some people to like do stuff and to get involved. And it's just healing as fuck. And also to know that we're not the source of the healing. We're outsourcing it to the professionals. But it's just like a theme of getting rid of that misinformation that we were all taught about therapy, and trying to break down those walls and those barriers. God, it's so rewarding.
A couple of things you've mentioned on a few occasions when we've chatted privately, as well as on here, about progressive Christianity. And it seems to me when you look at progressive Christianity that it's cherry picking. They're cherry picking the bits of the Bible they like and the bits of the Bible they don't like, and some people have described it as cafeteria Christianity. I don't know if you think that's accurate. Like that. But because they do that with their Bible, they also seem to think that they can do it with science. That yes. I like this bit of science and I like that bit of science. So you were saying about the mental health aspect, and that's science-based. People have studied psychology and how to help people through issues. And they don't want anything to do with that, because God should do that, or the Holy Spirit should be helping you through these things. But how many of them don't have an iPhone?
Right. Well, and there's an appropriation of therapy. Like, I think that it is being destigmatized, like in progressive Christianity circles. But like I would do a couple of questions. Like, you get 3 or 4 questions in and you realize, why is this professional therapy helping you better than your faith did? Well,
because it's real.
So like it's selective. Remember, and it's also like you cherry pick the Bible. You also have to cherry pick your religion's history. Like the progressive Christian wants to talk about Black liberation theology, and it's like, you wouldn't have to have Christian liberation theology if you didn't have Christian oppression theology. And if both of those things are found in the same book with equal footing, there's an issue. Like, change how you're getting information. It's just selective everything. And it came to my realization that, like, okay, let's say that they're willing to take anybody into their church. Is that really a commentary on their openness, or is that a commentary on how many demographics they're willing to assimilate? Because it's not at all that an atheist is going to be able to get a job as a pastor in a church. No. It's just as much for them as a Baptist church is for women. You can come just keep your mouth shut. And the same with like a sexually active gay. If you want to be part of that culture, you have to assimilate to it. It's not for everyone, it is for them, but they allow more demographics to be assimilated now, and it's just a constant pivoting of views, and then to make it sound like they've been this humanistic presence this entire time. No, you are constantly having to change the shit that you say in order to survive in a modern culture that is being influenced by external, therefore secular, humanism. And I don't know. It's just, you're absolutely right. It's just a cherry picking of impact, cherry picking of history, cherry picking of the source material. I mean, if you can look at the Bible and see homophobia and say, well, that's wrong, then put all the other doctrines that you are like your pet beliefs, put them on the same level and say, how would I know if these didn't actually happen? Would there be a distinctive way? No. Shit. So you have to admit, like, it's a holy book, therefore it's a take all or nothing book. If you're not willing to, as a progressive Christian, do the same progressive treatment to Islam, for instance, or Scientology, where you just say, well, the good things they said they meant, the bad things they didn't mean. That's not what they said. If it is what it says, then you're not understanding it right. If you are understanding it right, well, you're probably just complaining about it because you were hurt by it. There's always like this constant spin city bullshit. And I think that being more wise to that is probably going to be more healthy in the long run for yourself and for humanity, right? That's my view, at least. That's my soapbox.
Yeah. You said the word assimilate in there a couple of times, and I slightly feel that you're preempting our discussion of Star Trek, which is for later in this conversation.
Okay.
But I get what you're saying, and the changing history actually just struck me that recently I saw an interview with Andrew Seidel. I forget who he was talking to because I watch so much stuff.
Did you know that his butt has its own Twitter account?
His what?
His butt, that Andrew, he retweeted it recently. He's like, somebody made a parody account because evidently he's got a nice butt. But no, his butt has a Twitter. And anyway, go on.
He was talking about the appropriation of history and how many Christians now claim that they were the ones that abolished slavery, although if you look historically, many of them were actually, there were some. I understand that the Quakers were very much against and so on, but some people were using the Bible to justify slavery. And he was saying,
so deep.
He was saying
that before we were called white people, we were called Christian, and that it was a Ben Franklin Foundation or something, a podcast I've listened to that's on Christianity's like historical relationship with slavery, and it is bonkers that like what the author of this book is referred to as Protestant supremacy is the precursor to white supremacy. That it even came to the point where Christians would only get Muslim slaves because Christians shouldn't have other Christians as slaves. So some slaves would convert so that they wouldn't have to be specific, like they wouldn't have to be slaves. The history of that is so deep. I interrupted you. Go on.
It's a good point to bring up. Andrew was saying that he feels that now Christians is trying to get on the right side of marriage equality.
Oh, absolutely. It's bullshit.
They've fought against it, and then it's happened, and now they want to get ahead of the game and say it was us all along that did that. And I'm just trying to think of a situation here in Australia. In 2017, we had a plebiscite. I can't believe that Australia, a progressive country like we are, was actually behind the US in having marriage equality. But I believe our plebiscite was in 2017. And of course, there was a huge vote in favour of granting marriage equality. But the No campaign was very much religious, religiously framed. And the prime minister at the time, I think he was the prime minister at the time. We changed prime ministers like people change underpants over here. And I think he was the prime minister at the time, Tony Abbott. He's quite Christian. And he wouldn't even attend his own sister's marriage because it was a same-sex marriage. And, that's how strongly he felt about it. But the sort of things that were coming out in the No campaign were ridiculous. They were saying things like, are we going to be teaching children to have anal sex in school and stuff like that? And it's like, no. Do we teach them how to do sex now? No, we give them sex ed. We tell them how to, do sex safely and, how not to get pregnant and how not to spread, STDs and things like that. So it was just absolute crazy making. They had no arguments whatsoever. And a lot of it, as I say, comes out of religion. And I don't know if you've ever seen that meme with all the different types of marriage in the Bible.
Yes.
It always makes me laugh. One man and 300 concubines. Always makes me laugh. So you got all these different types that are in the Bible, but we can't have one man with another man because that's not in there. Just absolute crazy making stuff. But as Andrew Seidel says, they're trying to get on the right side of that now and saying it was all their idea. And if we let them, the church will rewrite history.
For me personally, because this is why I have a beef. Like, if I am Joe Exotic, progressive Christianity is my Carol Baskins. Like, it's such bullshit because, like, the way that it works for me then is, well, you should have known that God was okay with you being gay, Brady. But I'm like, I suffered in silence from 14 to 28. 14 of my prime years too, because I ended up having to have surgery after that, and like I gained weight. I was one sexy little motherfucker, okay? Like, I had to give up like my prime year. I could have been getting laid, and I had to give that up because I was worshiping God and I was faithful to him and his word. And you know what? During that 14 years of me begging God on a daily basis and writing what I call my shame journals, where just like prayers on paper because I didn't have any other mental health avenues, I was just like freaking the fuck out. Progressive Jesus never answered my prayers either. Like whatever Richard Rohr is jacking off to, he never answered my prayers either. So in order for me to like stand alongside those people, like, yeah, this is valid, it's a complete erasure to my. So what I hate is like whenever straight white men would get online and they would make fun of people who followed the Bible because they're progressive Christians, and they're like, oh, you take the Bible literally. Well, you know what? When it comes to your beliefs in God, guess where those come from too, you stupid motherfucker. Like, they're coming from the exact same goddamn book. So don't treat me like I'm an idiot for believing it because you're doing the same thing. I lived it in silence and oppression and whatever. And so for you to, like, as a white man, be like, well, no, God's cool the gays now, doesn't do shit about the people who have been fucking murdered out of my community since the beginning of this bull crap. You know what I mean? Like, it is just a complete cherry picking of history, and then putting the responsibility and the weight on you as if you're the one who should have known the whole time. Gaslighting, that's what my dad did to my mom when he was cheating on her. It's the same victim blaming, gaslighting, passing the buck, fucking bullshit. And if I hadn't started seeing it since age 7, I don't know if I would have picked up on it by age 22 or 23 or then 28 when I started deconstructing, So it's like, it's the same goddamn patterns, but fuck me for having enough life experience to be able to see it and to see the patterns and to call out the patterns. So yeah, progressive Christians do not historically like Brady and have historically tried to throw me out of the bus, but has historically not been able to because I don't play by their fucking rules.
So I like what you said about the progressive Jesus. Like, everybody's got their own version of Jesus. there's probably as many Jesuses as there's been Christians.
Yes.
And so you've got progressive Jesus, you've got fundamentalist Jesus, and of course, if you watch Talladega Nights, there's Sweet Baby Jesus as well.
Sweet baby Jesus. Yeah, or like the mystic Jesus. Okay, so like, what are we even doing at this point? Like, why are you not doing the same just insane benefit of a doubt for other faiths? Oh, because it's the dominant culture. Oh, okay. Like, it would be okay. Think of the South, like here in America. Of course, there's going to be people in the South. They're like, well, no, the Civil War wasn't actually about slavery. It was actually. They're always going to pivot, and like seeing those patterns, and realizing that progressive Christianity, etc., just does the same pivoting. It's just the same shit. It drives me bonkers. Can you tell?
Only a little bit. Just let's just touch on one episode. I mean, there's lots of episodes of your podcast, and people should really check that out if they haven't. Life After Podcast, because I do a lot of traveling backwards and forwards to work on my own. I listen to a lot of podcasts, so I get through quite a few when I start listening to one. But one that stood out for me, well, actually, there's one that stood out for me that I talked to you about when we're not recording, but because of a guest that I've got coming on next week, I don't really want to talk about that in this one. So the one I was going to pick on was Dave Warnock. What's Dave Warnock like as a guest? Did you get to talk to him much when you weren't recording?
A little bit, yeah. And he is one that, like, I know I'm going to meet in person someday. Like, it's just like in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh yeah, when I meet Dave Warnock soon, like we were supposed to go to this conference thing together recently, but that was called off because like crazy shit happened to the woman who was organizing it. And then, Corona and all this. But Dave Warnock, just his story, who he is really important. Like, my ex-wife's new wife's dad is going through ALS, and that's Dave Warnock's thing. Is he was a pastor, it's kind of, lost relationship to his family, lost his support system like I had, and then had to deal with ALS, and then came out and was able to like talk about his experience. And so just his like secular humanistic optimism, and just I have a shirt of his from his like, little store of like, it says like carpe the effing diem, because that's his, that's
yeah.
To say, sure, to say fucking, but like, yeah, I really look up to him because, when you leave a community like that, everybody that I looked up to ended up being just indoctrinated shitheads. That my relationship with them was nothing about me. It had to do with my ability to benefit the faith. And so losing role models is a hard thing. And then having to like look to television for those, looking to fictional characters for those. I don't have a dad. Fuck him. He hasn't talked to me ever since I came out. He's a cheating, abusive piece of shit. So I'll disown him quicker than he can disown me. And just that lack of like role models is hard. But then like Dave Warnock and other people like him are like these older males that are like, yeah, this is what it looks like to be my age and doing this thing that you're doing right now in your 20s and 30s. And I really love that, and I respect that out of him, especially with ALS. Like, he's not going to live forever. And the fact that him coming face to face with death hasn't turned him into some like blubbering faith person, didn't make him go back to everything. But now he's forging a way publicly on social media, 2020, he's forging a way of like what it looks like to face death without faith. And that's something that like why people created faith, created stories. And he's forging a new way that's more on observation and more on the right here and now, what's actually present, what actually cares enough to show up for him and show up for other people, not what you're just supposed to trust is there, but it's silent because it doesn't explain why it's silent. It just is, it doesn't care. It'd rather you just put the pieces. No, the people who show up is what fucking matters. And that's the badassery from Dave Warnock that I want to take on for the rest of my life.
Great. So you've actually touched on this once already, about how we might actually be better off getting our morality from Star Trek than we are from the Bible. Yeah, and we're both huge Trekkies. I know that. So I think maybe we should talk a bit about Star Trek. My favorite now, having watched the whole thing, is the new one, Picard.
So good.
What a fantastic series that was. I think historically I like TNG the best, but I understand you're a big Deep Space Nine fan.
Big time. I adore it. And it's funny because this is my third chapter with Star Trek, I guess I could say, because my dad liked it growing up, and so it was on the house, like TNG. And then whenever I went to that last church I was disfellowshipped from, and the pastor was like a father to me. He was a big Star Trek fan, so we would talk about it then. But I just kind of got sick of it between each fucking failure of a man. I was just like, I don't need to deal with this. And then what happened was James Croft, or Dr. James Croft that I mentioned earlier, he's a big Trek fan. So I was like, man, whatever. I guess I can give it a try. And so we go into quarantine. And I needed something that's secular humanist, that's optimistic. And I'm I needed something with a lot of content because I'm going to be stuck inside all the time. So I started what I called Quarkantine. And I just started watching Star Trek, starting with Deep Space Nine and Cisco. Even as a kid, this has always been a theme that's just been imprinted with me. My middle name is Lee. That's my mom's middle name because I come from the Robert E. Lee family. I live in Missouri, rural Missouri, suburban Missouri. Everybody's fucking white. And even as a kid, I was just I can't watch television unless there's representation. That was always important to me. Community is one of my favorite sitcoms, and the representation is on point, and I love it. So Deep Space Nine was something I gravitated towards, and it's about a single dad running a space station, right? And so I started watching it, and I'm just oh my God, this is so nuanced. Oh my God, there's so many things going on. And Ronald D. Moore, I'm a huge Battlestar Galactica fan. My son is named Hilo, for Christ's sake. So I could trust Ronald D. Moore. I can get into this. So yes, season one, I think it's weird that Jake Sisko at the age of 16 had a girlfriend who was 23. That's weird. I'm glad they got rid of that because that's the only unethical thing. But outside of that, it's I'm learning about these complex ideas in a such a humanistic way. And it was coming to me of how much more I can learn from these shows and this writing right now than I could from reading the Bible, which, if you looked at the representation of the Bible, it's just where I came from, all white men, let's be honest, all dark-skinned men, and then a couple of women, and the only reason that they're famous is because they suck somebody's dick when they're asleep. That's what happened in Esther. No, is it Ruth or Esther? There's a euphemism in the Bible where it talks about how she revealed his feet. No, that's not his feet, honey. There's more going on there. So it's the only ones who actually were able to get a voice or anything, or is if they fed into the male supremacy patriarchy bullshit. And so I'm fuck all that. So now I've got the Star Trek, and Janeway, is my goddess of determination and caring about people. I start to see running this online community for the life after. I have to make decisions like Cisco sometimes, and that's now my role model of I want to make ethical decisions. I want to do what's right by people, and I want to be intersectional. I want to think what you said earlier, was a passive empathy. I want to have the opposite of that, because that's what intersectionality is. And in the way that I got to intersectionality as like a life important thing to me is because Jesus said, treat others the way you want to be treated. And then I realized, like, yeah, but also I want to treat others the way they want to be treated. And I want to treat myself the way that I treat others, because I, as a, product of authoritarian indoctrination, I was all about, that side of codependency that's always a servant. And I started just like have more like dynamic and more radical empathy in Deep Space Nine and Voyager and the TNG that I've been watching was that. And Discovery, oh my God, I love Discovery. The representation of that is so important. And then also Picard, like, blew my mind. And one of my favorite parts about Picard is 7 of 9, because let me show you this. I just bought this from Etsy. This is my new like 7 of 9. I'm a huge cat person, but like I had to get this because it's perfect. But like 7 of 9, for those who don't know these stories, she was part of this robotic. They were robot zombies, and she was part of this collective. They all had one mind. They all like thought together. They're all connected by Wi-Fi, basically, and they did what they were told. And that is the authoritarian bullshit that I grew up in. And she got out, and now I'm watching Voyager, and it's like I got to the part where she's in it, and she's like getting out, and she's going through the same stuff that I did. She misses being around her collective the whole time, and it's like a hard adjustment for her. She's used to being told what to do, and like having to think for herself is hard, and to know like what to do and have more empathy and dynamic. All of this stuff, the stuff that she's going through by coming out of that, is what I went through. And now in Picard, 25 years. Sorry, why am I getting teared up? Shit. Second time today. Now in Picard, 25 years later, she's this freedom fighter, and her whole thing is that she's going to fight for the rights of ex-Borg, that were just like her, that she is going to be the protector that she needed when she was young. God, I'm crying again. Fucking 7 of 9, I hate you. I'm inspired by that. I'm inspired by that in ways that the Bible never could touch on and never could have the empathy of, or the like dynamic empathy of, because I'm not going to relate to just some patriarchal piece of shit male that the Bible tells a story about. I relate more honestly with female characters, because I can relate to the plight that they had to have a voice, to matter, like in a sexist environment. And as a gay man, I'm represented by that more. And yeah, there's just something about 7 of 9, Picard is like the dad that I wish I had. Cisco is the man that I want to be. And I have a kitten. He reminds me of Quark, and I feel like his Odo because I'm constantly yelling at him. But like just these relationships, I find so much more diverse and so much more representative of myself and the real life and of the people that I love and care about.
It's interesting that you talk about 7 and 9, and I hate to say this from a sort of sort of patriarchal point of view, a male point of view, but she's 7 and 9 is she's hugely inspirational to heterosexual males, but
there, yeah, I would bang that. I get it, man. I don't want to brag, but my ex-wife is like, she's still hot as fuck. But no, I totally get it. Like 7 of 9 is sexy as hell. As a gay man, like she messes with my spectrum. My Kinsey scale. That's 7. And even now, even if Picard got the way her hair and that cost, she aged so well. I hate her. I hope I age half that good.
I think with DS9, I think back because I have watched every single episode at least once. I think it's interesting because you got this mix of different peoples on the station. So you got these characters like Garrick and Quark and Odo, and they all come from different species and have different sort of views of morality and so on, and they've got to try and mesh all that together. Yeah, and I think it's really cleverly done. And I think Quark, I mean, he's got this sort of Ferengi sort of hard-assed everything's about money type of view. But then occasionally, he just gets himself
hard.
back into a place where he has to do the right thing, despite his instincts to make money.
Yeah. Like, I'll never forget. There was one time where Odo was, because Odo's a changeling, and so he was starting to like melt, and he had to like quickly go to the Dominion where the other changelings are because he thought he was the only one. He was the only
Yeah,
one that he knew, and then so he had to go there to figure out a way to like heal. And there was a part where like he had to walk through Cork's bar to get to the pot or whatever, and Cork was like, "You're gonna be back, right?" And Odo was like, I bet you hope, and and I forgot what they said, but it was just like this like touching romantic moment where it's like they are just this cat and mouse thing where I think they really would like sacrifice so much for each other, but at the same time they hate each other because one was the cop and one was the piece of shit criminal constantly, right? But yeah, I love them. I love them. Love them. Love them.
yeah. For me, Star Trek is fantastic. There's a lot of people who have this sort of discussion, Trek versus Wars, if you like, Star Trek against Star Wars, and I just don't see Star Wars. Star Wars is vaguely entertaining. It's not really science fiction, if you ask me, in the way that Star Trek is. It doesn't deal with a lot of issues in the same way. And it's interesting. I was once asked, if you had to explain to an alien what order they should watch the Star Wars movies in, I said, well, it's very easy. You watch 4, 5, and 6, and then you don't bother.
Honestly, I can see that. Like my son, he's at the age where we could watch that and it's good and he likes it. And that's been cool, to have like something that we could talk about. I feel like The Mandalorian is doing a better job at that just because it does have more themes of like protection and more like nuance to like character development and stuff. But yeah, I've always been more of a television over movie person because I want to spend time with these people. I want to see them grow. I want to see them change. I want to see them overcome difficult situations. And I want that to be like a longer relationship. Whereas I feel like the Star Wars movies are kind of more, like you said, they're not dealing with like humanistic themes. It's more of just the science fiction backdrop, but it's not an emphasis and it's not really sciencey. It's just the aesthetic almost. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. While we're on this, it's just reminded me, talking of dealing with themes and big themes in a sci-fi setting. What do you think of the Orville?
So I only watched a couple of episodes because I didn't know. I only associated Seth MacFarlane with Family Guy, and I thought, yeah, he's kind of like the American Ricky Gervais, I guess, just because they look alike. But I didn't realize that he was a huge Trek fan, and I didn't realize that he was a Sagan connection, that he helped produce Cosmos until I started listening to Sagan's one of his audiobooks like a week ago, right? So I was like, okay, let me look at Orville, and I thought it was a parody. I thought it would be a satire, but no, it's just if Star Trek happened in a slightly more comedic world. And then I saw like Brandon Braga is one of the producers, which of course he did TNG and all that good stuff. And then on top of that, I saw that oh my God, what is her name? Cassidy from Deep Space Nine is one of the series regulars. So it's like seeing that they made it clear we're not here to make fun of Star Wars. We're here, or Star Trek. We're here to make a Star Trek in a slightly funnier place. And then I was like, okay, I can get into this, but I've only watched like a few episodes because I've been like obsessed with Voyager and Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, you really should watch the Orville. It is great, and I do believe that it's been saved by moving to a different platform, because I don't think they were going to make any more where it was. I'm not sure where we get the new series of the Orville here in Australia, but we must do, because it's been binge watch every time a season's come out. I've watched it within a couple of days. It's been fantastic. I know about Seth MacFarlane, Family Guy, but have you ever watched A Million Ways to Die in the West?
No, but I've heard of it.
Oh man, you must watch A Million Ways to Die in the West. I
Okay.
downloaded it one night when my wife was out doing something, and I just thought, oh, I'm going to watch a movie, and I thought, I was scrolling through, and I found A Million Ways to Die in the West, and I watched it, and then I went back to the beginning and watched it again. It was so good.
That that says something. All right, it's
Yeah.
on my list. I'll have to
and
check
then
it out.
and then the next day I told my wife about it and we watched it together. So I watched it 3 times in 2 days. It's so
Oh
funny.
my God,
Uh,
you're like my son when he was 5 and he watched Back Back to the Future 3. He called it Cowboy Choo Choos, and like that's all he wanted to watch over and over and over. So yeah, totally.
my wife likes that one. My favorite Back to the Future is the second one,
Number two, I agree.
number two.
Well,
I
okay,
love the way that
back to Deep
they,
Space
they
Nine.
fit. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking of Deep Space Nine. I just recently watched the Tribbles and Tribulations episode, which does that same thing that Deep Space, or the same thing that Back to the Future 2 does, where it goes back in time, tells a different story in the same setting. So it's taking the original Star Trek with Captain Kirk and all of that, took the B footage of it, recreated sets, and then told a completely different story of them going back in time and being in the same place. And it's overflown with the other episode from the original series. That's so brilliant. Like, I am all for that. I thought it was so cool. Like, yeah, absolutely. Number two is
Yeah,
for this.
you just reminded me. I mentioned in that episode that Wolf, of course, comes into Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, it was good to see him again.
Yeah, which is good. Yeah, so bringing in Wolf,
Can I tell you a
that was
secret?
great.
I'm not allowed to say who or anything, but I in the life after we just recently started doing like weekly video calls like this on Zoom, right? And in
Yeah.
one of the ladies I was in with actually went on a date IRL with Michael Dorn, and we were just like, "Oh my God, tell us all of the stories!" And she's like legitimately good friends with Garrett Wang, who plays Ensign Kim in
Oh
Voyager. Like,
wow.
we went to her wedding, and she showed me a picture, and I'm just like, you know, jealous as hell, but also like, damn, I've got cool friends now.
That's cool. Okay, Brady, we've been talking for quite a while and we've gone in a few different places, but I feel like there's so much more of this conversation still to have. So maybe in a few weeks we'll go for it again and
Let's
talk
go.
about a few other things. I've certainly got a whole load of things on my talking points here that we never even got to, but
Oh,
we can't
really?
make this hours and hours long, and I know you've got things to
Well,
go
that and I get on
do.
my soapbox sometimes, Morph, and it's just bad. When I get on my soapbox, I'm like, it's get in for the ride, you know? We're going to be here for a while.
That's what this is all about. It's about unloading. But the important thing is that we got to talk about Star Trek. So,
That's right.
yeah. So
Cool.
thanks very much for joining me, and of course, thanks very much. After I was such a complete fuckwit with the first recording,
Hey, it happens.
for
It happens to us.
yeah. Good luck with the podcast, and I'll be in touch with you soon.
It sounds awesome. Thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it. And I hope your listeners have a great day. Also, look us up, the Life After Podcast. And we also have a private group on our Facebook where people outside of the group don't know who's in it and you don't know what's posted. So you're safe. And it's just a safe place to deconstruct your faith. We've been told it's the most well managed, best moderated group like that. And that's kind of a cool thing for us. So we're proud of it.
Yeah, I think that's so important because there's so many people out there who are losing their faith or have lost their faith, but they don't dare admit it to anybody. And to find that there is community out there and people that they can talk to who have gone through similar experiences, I think is very important.
We even have like sub rooms now too, like for LGBT. If you've got questions about that, or and there's another one that some of our group like members started that I think is amazing. They call it racist goal or like anti-racist goals. So it's like in there where it's for white people to go in there and like talk and to like go through and figure out and learn from each other instead of making it a black person or a person of color's job to educate us. We're allowing them to take a break and for us to learn how to educate ourselves. And when we have questions, we can go, but also just to be able to kind of like have a space to like unfold some of that shit too. So faith, racism, all the intersectionality stuff, sexuality, parenting, divorce, all of these are things that we really want to focus on and help people deconstruct and move on and come out as a more humanistic person, a more whole person, you know?
So if people are on Facebook, they just search for
The Life After
your
podcast
Life After podcast and they'll find that.
with like a purple blue back, like album cover with white letters that say Life After. So that's us.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Brady.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Marv.